Hey guys, this is Robert Breedlove from the What is Money Show. And as you've learned by watching this show, Bitcoin is the single most important asset you can own in the 21st century. And one of the most important companies in Bitcoin today is NYDIG. NYDIG's mission is to facilitate financial security for all. They accomplish this by bringing a high level of professionalization and sophistication to the Bitcoin marketplace. As a true game changer in the industry, NYDIG is safely unlocking the power of Bitcoin for forward-thinking individuals and institutions alike. By using NYDIG, you will gain access to an end-to-end institutional-grade platform, providing Bitcoin OTC transactions, Bitcoin collateralized borrowing, secure custody, asset management, derivatives, financing, market research, and more. And all of these services meet the highest regulatory, governance, and audit standards. Led by Robbie Gutman, Yin Zhao, and Ross Stevens, NYDIG has absolutely exploded onto the Bitcoin scene recently and is leading the way for ongoing institutional adoption in this nascent asset class. So please be sure to check out NYDIG as a single source for all your Bitcoin needs. Robert Kiyosaki, thank you for joining me on the What is Money Show.
Oh, thank you.
You are a man of great wisdom. And I've just finished reading your book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which I guess was what really put you on the map originally. And it's still the #1 personal finance book of all time. So congratulations on that. Quite an impressive feat.
Not only that, it's #1 in parenting today of all things, which makes me really happy because, as you know, we don't teach money at school.
That's right.
So if parents of your age start teaching their kids, we change the world.
That's right. I agree.
Yeah,
I agree with that completely. I think that's where I've decided to pour my energy as well as into education, because I do think it is the most important avenue for changing the world. And so we were just talking about, you grew up in Hawaii, and this book essentially tells the story of the opposing philosophies on life and work you received from your two different dads, which was your father and then the father of your best friend, I think, that you basically grew up with.
Correct.
And so for the audience that maybe hasn't read your book, maybe you could just give a brief intro, like the impetus for writing it, maybe the story behind it. I can't imagine you expected it to be as successful as it has been. Or maybe you did. But maybe you just give us a little background on it. That'd be great.
Well, the real reason I wrote the book is because we have no financial education in school. As we're talking about, I had the good fortune to start learning about money at the age of 10 from my rich dad. And the story of Rich Dad was that when I was 10 years old, I asked my 5th grade school teacher, said, hey, when are we going to learn about money? Because I wasn't doing well in school. And I went to a rich kid's school by accident. Not that I was a rich kid, but just by the way the district was parted. So on one side of the street were all the rich white kids. And the other side of the street were all the Asian kids like me. And I always thought that was kind of interesting, going, how come these white kids are rich and why are the Asian kids poor? And the reason was because the white kids' parents owned the plantations. Mm-hmm. So Hawaii is a plantation state. We weren't slaves, but we came over in the 1880s as indentured servants. That's the history of that. Mm-hmm. And most indentured servants, they always plan to return home. But we never did. So I'm 4th generation Japanese American, and I'm sitting in class, my friends, all guys like you, and they got new bicycles and their parents drive new Ford station wagons. And I got an old beat up bicycle. My friends are across the street at a school called Union School. And Union is interested because they were labor unions. So it was a classic. Robert, classical capitalist versus socialist.
Yeah.
Capitalist union versus owners, slave owners versus laborers. It was like, God, I couldn't have been born in a better place. So I think it's kind of interesting today with all this Black Lives Matter stuff and all this. I'm going, well, I understand. I understand.
Yeah.
But that's why I asked my school teacher, what am I going to learn about money? Because I want to be like these rich white guys. that was as innocent as it was.
That's
and then she said, we don't teach money at school. And I thought that was strange. So I go home to the old man who was poor dad, and he's the head of education. He ultimately got his PhD from Stanford in education. But as you know, a PhD stands for poor, helpless, and desperate. And so I asked my dad, I said, hey, when am I going to learn about money at school? He says, we don't teach money at school. So Robert, that was a second, like, why?
Yeah.
As Mexicans would say, ¿Qué pasa? What's going on here?
Yeah.
And so that's when I pestered everybody. And finally, my poor dad said, go study with your best friend. His father's going to be a rich man. I said, why is that? He said, because he's an entrepreneur. And that's the key. See, the way out of being a slave to the rich is entrepreneurship.
Yes.
And so my rich dad was a man with no education. And the funny story is he was a construction guy. I mean, he owned a construction company, he owned hotels, but he actually built his own properties. So that makes sense. Mm-hmm. As an accountant, you understand what he was doing. Mm-hmm. He was acquiring the land, financing the thing. He built hotels, stores, and all this. But when at 10 years old, he was driving a dump truck. And so my best friend, Mike, was all embarrassed because my white guy friends and women girls, they drove up on the Ford panel wagons, really nice stuff, 50, 55, 56, stuff like this. Mm-hmm. And Mike would ask his father not to drop him off near school because he drove a dump truck. So, Robert, I learned early in life the way out was via entrepreneurship. That's the story.
That's amazing. Yeah. So you were growing up right along that dividing line, then that was actually physically manifest in the rich and the poor on either side of the street, but also this difference in mentality. And I thought this really captured it for me in your book. And I guess we should say the rich dad and poor dad, they weren't, one guy wasn't poor and one guy wasn't rich. They actually both made very significant incomes throughout their lives. They're both very smart guys. It's more where they ended up and the mentality that they brought to the table. And the dividing line that I thought captured it well was you said poor dad would often say, I can't afford it.
Correct.
Whereas rich dad would say, how can I afford it?
Correct.
And so in my mind, you've got poor dad making a decree effectively, which shuts down his own thinking. You're just, correct. You're providing an answer where you should be providing a question, correct, that actually forces you to think. So you could say decree shuts down thinking, inquiry invites thinking. And I think that just is very fundamental to me because we see this world today where it's government decrees are effectively shutting down thinking. We think we can just point a regulation or a piece of legislation at a problem to fix it. And it doesn't work like that. We need more the inquiry of markets, of entrepreneurs, experimenting, trying to solve problems and advancing us. So I thought that was excellent. And then basically that people people shape their lives with their patterns of their thoughts. So is that what it all comes down to? Like it starts with the mindset, right? That we then carry out into our actions in the world, which shape our lives. Is that how you saw the difference between rich dad and poor dad unfold?
Well, it's pretty pervasive. Like my rich dad often said, the most important piece of real estate is the distance between this here and this here. If you don't get this thing working for you, it's fallow. It's not producing. And so what happens for most people when they go to school, they shut it off. They just sit there and memorize what some school teacher tells them to memorize.
Right.
Like go to school, get a job, work hard, save money, pay your taxes, and get out of debt and live debt free. And I'd sit there listening to this stuff and I'm going, but that's not what my rich dad does. Mm. And so I'd go to work for my rich dad for free because my rich dad refused to pay me. He says, the moment you accept a paycheck, your mind goes into gear. I'm going to work for money. And as a CPA, you know the rich don't work for money. And as a person who loves Bitcoin, you don't want the dollar anyway. But most people are addicted to that dollar or the yen or the peso.
Yeah.
And that's what schools are indoctrinating kids to do, is to work for that fake dollar.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really what this guy Thomas Sowell says. He's at Stanford, and he's a black man. And he says, education is now indoctrination into socialism. And that's I'm a U.S. Marine, fought in Vietnam twice, and I fought for capitalism. I don't fight for socialism. So it's more than just how can I. It's what is my work life dedicated to?
Yes.
Do I want job security? Not really.
Yeah. Okay. No, it's a great point. The other difference between rich dad and poor dad is, our rich dad would always say, I don't work for money, money works for me.
Correct.
Which is the capitalist mentality versus the socialist or bureaucratic mentality. And I love this too. He said that you said job security is what meant everything to poor dad. He's always looking for a secure job, a lot of benefits, steady salary, security, all of these things. Whereas rich dad was always focused on learning and experience and I guess a variety of perspective too. You told the story of how you sat in on a lot of meetings with his bankers and accountants and attorneys. So he was very much knowledge and experience focused. Whereas,
if I could share this picture here, there's a couple. Makes it really simple.
Yeah, please.
Because I flunked out of school twice because I can't write. Now, my book is number 20 in the world, Robert. Of all books in the world, I'm number 20.
Wow. Incredible.
Number 19 is the Bible. No, I'm only kidding. I'll probably go to hell too. But here, this is the thing. This is book number 2. Okay.
Okay.
And my rich dad would say there's 4 kinds of people in the world: employees, self-employed or small business guys, big business or brands. And I is not a 401k guy. I is an insider. So I'm always in, that what they say, this insiders is illegal. That's not true. Insider trading is done all day long. Yeah. I don't have stocks, bonds, mutual funds, or a 401k. I only invest from the inside. So I put my own deals together. I am a capitalist. I don't need to buy a stock because I can build my own assets. So when I was about 10 years old, my brain started to shift, saying, I'd rather be on this side, and this is poor dad, job security, and this is my mom. She wanted to become a doctor or a lawyer, and I said, Mom, there's only a problem with that. Those are smart people. She goes, You're right. You better stay on this. I was a C student, and so I belong on this side.
Yeah.
And so if you look at most entrepreneurs, they drop out of school.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know that? Because you're not going to get entrepreneurship on this side. You're going to get it on the B and the I side. So what Rich Dad does is we teach on this side. It's up to you. This side is the hardest, as you know, as an accountant, you know how hard this side is.
Of course.
This side is, you have to be really smart.
Yeah.
But this side here is pretty easy.
Yeah. The trade-off between security and freedom, right? Like you're either out there with your own skin in the game, making your own way, which is a high risk, high reward lifestyle, or you can be under the thumb of someone or some big company where you've got a more predictable, secure lifestyle, usually, but it can also all be taken away from you, right? Where if you get laid off after 20 years on the job, then you're just completely unprepared for the wild, so to speak. And my stepdad used to say to me all the time, it's funny you talk about A students and C students. He goes, a C student hires an A student every single day of the week. So it's not about,
That's not a very popular concept there, Robert.
Yeah, but it's
A
true.
students work for C students, and B students work for the government. That's where B stands for bureaucrat.
Yeah. So that's a good branch into, I guess it's capitalists versus bureaucrats in a way. And it comes down to property ultimately. Capitalists are about creating wealth and monetizing property. As you say, you make your own deals, whereas bureaucrats are really about confiscating or taxing or stealing from the productive efforts of others, flat out. And as you say in the book, taxes punish those who produce and reward those who don't produce.
Right.
It's as simple as that. It's a very straightforward incentive system. And it blows your mind when you think about the percentage, because it ends up, the government actually is the most expensive purchase most people make in their lifetimes. You make the point that most people are working from January to May just for their government. So how is one to deal with this? I guess the entrepreneurial path is to figure out the rules of the game and then go and play it. And clearly you've done this very well in real estate, where I think you're using a combination of borrowing plus 1031 exchanges and corporate sheltering profits in corporations. You're constantly playing this game to pay yourself first, as Rich Dad taught you, but still play by the rules. Maybe you could explain a little bit of that.
Yeah, as a lot of people think I'm a real estate guy, I'm really not. I own about $1 billion worth of real estate. 100% debt. If you understand that one, it's called leverage. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because I learned very early on when I was in Vietnam. That's when Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard, and the dollar became debt. So that's what changed my mind. But if you look at this here, it's just a matter of awareness. This is book 2, Cashflow Quadrant.
Yeah.
Employees, and this is worldwide. As an accountant, you know this. 40% of their income goes to the government first.
Yeah. So 40% of employee income straight to government. Yeah.
Yeah. And for the self-employed or the small entrepreneur, it's 60%.
Wow.
Well, Robert, what's happening? You see this all the time. So what happens is these young kids, they say, well, I'll quit my job, become an entrepreneur. And they walk into the highest tax bracket possible.
Right.
Okay. So on this side here, B stands for big business, 500 employees by law. It's 20%.
Right.
So when I was a kid, I said, I want to get onto this side. And the true I is 0.
It is nothing. Right.
Yeah. And so when you watch Trump, Trump and I have written 2 books together. I know he's hated, but he's a good guy. When Hillary said, it's true you don't pay taxes. And what did Trump say on national television? That means I'm smart. And so Robert, as an accountant, that he operates from here. Okay, so the reason I invest in real estate is to offset the taxes here.
From the business.
Okay, so let's say I make $1 million here. I come down here, let's say I make $1 million, I lever up 4. So I borrow $4 million. My basis is now $5 million. I depreciate the $5 million to get it down to 0.
So you're taking the profit streams from the corporate investments, putting them into real estate, using that as collateral to borrow and expand the base, and then just depreciating off.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean,
it's genius.
It's this here is that I use debt to buy my assets.
Yeah.
So this is the liability, this is debt. So I borrow $4 million here. My basis, I make $1 million here, borrow 4. I'm at 5 here. I depreciate 5.
Gotcha. And that that offsets all the income that was produced originally. Wow.
And guess what? I make more and more money.
Right.
And that's what Trump.
Yeah.
You know, Hillary makes it the old-fashioned way. They pick your pockets.
I thought it was, for the audience, it's just on audio. There's a brilliant visuals in the book that are breaking it down just that simply. You've got assets and liabilities. You've got income and expenses. And the rich dad strategy is really just to increase the asset side of the balance sheet, largely through the difference between income and expenses, but also through these strategies you're mentioning here.
Well, I'm showing a picture of the asset column, which is, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is basically a book on accounting. That's all it is. Yeah. Income, expense, statement of cash flow. That's it.
Yeah.
It's so simple. When I was a kid, I learned that playing Monopoly. So by the time I was in high school, I was a wreck.
Yes.
Because every time the teacher said to me, if you don't get good grades, you won't get a good job. I said, good. Yeah. I don't plan on getting a job. And I was all screwed up because I had two dads. But the nice thing about it is your generation and younger now, they're not looking for job security because they know that's a myth.
That's right.
I just read this article about Amazon. Algorithms now hire and fire you. That if you don't deliver a package within a certain parameter, you're fired.
I believe it. Yeah.
I mean, you don't even have a chance today.
Yeah. And
so the guys that use algorithms and technology and all that control the world, like Gates and Bezos and those guys. And our school teachers are still saying to kids, go to school, get a job. That's obsolete. Mm-hmm. So I wrote this book for today, which I did part of that for today and the quadrant for today. Because I think it's important that every young person know you're going to be an entrepreneur. You're cruising into a higher tax bracket. So the reason I have real estate is primarily because the banks will give me all the money I want for the real estate. It's a security, as you know.
Yeah. It's great collateral.
Collateral. I borrowed almost $1 billion in the last 5 years. Because after 2008, when the real estate market crashed and interest rates went down, not really religious, but I said, thank you, Jesus. He just sent me a crash and lower interest rates. And everybody else was going, oh, woe was me. Yeah. And I died and went to heaven.
So that points us to a great saying in your book as well, that rich people acquire assets. The poor and middle class acquire liabilities that they think are assets.
Yes, very well said.
So maybe
what does that tell me, man? You're 10 million times smarter than me and an accountant. What am I saying?
I mean, the way I read it is you make the point that a lot of people in the poor, or I guess you could say middle class, more so than the poor, treat their house as their greatest asset or greatest investment. But what in fact it is, it's typically encumbered with a large mortgage. There's a lot of expenses. It's basically, the way I look at a house is it's a durable consumer good, right? Whereas most people think it's, again, their largest asset and their largest expense and their largest piece of collateral for borrowing against. Whereas the rich would be trying to acquire unencumbered income generating assets. I think, is that sort of what
it doesn't have to be unencumbered. The point here is this: it goes to what they call financial literacy. Mm-hmm. It is in the definition of the word. Mm-hmm. So my rich dad, my poor dad always said my house is an asset because he was a PhD. And my rich dad said, your dad's an idiot, because what determines if something an asset or not is a statement of cash flow. As an accountant, you know that. So that's why in the cash flow board game, there's 3 statements: income expense, which is the income statement, balance sheet, and statement of cash flow. So that's what the game is called, cash flow.
Right.
So what the rich know how to do is how to control cash flow. I want cash flow flowing in.
Right.
But if you get a job and you pay taxes, cash is flowing out. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? So I just want to control my cash flow.
Yeah.
So it's really cash flow is what I'm after. So the reason I like real estate is, like, again, a simple example, I make $1 million in income. I borrow 4 million. I step up my basis to 5. I make income from the 5 million and I pay no tax. I've just controlled cash flow all the way around.
Mm.
And so it goes on to financial literacy. Assets put money in your pocket. Liabilities take money from your pocket. So today there's I talked to the guy who does my hair. He says, I just bought an asset. I said, what'd you buy? He said, oh, I got an $800,000 house. Mm-hmm. He's a hairdresser. I mean, he's going to have to cut a lot of hair to pay for the freaking house. But he thinks he's Donald Trump.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you, how do you fit gold, silver, Bitcoin into that framework? If they're not income producing assets, what do you consider those in that lens of assets versus liabilities?
They're a hedge against the Fed and the Treasury.
Mm.
I don't trust the Fed. I don't trust the Treasury.
Yeah.
And the definition of money is a unit of account, a store of value, and what's the other one?
Medium of exchange.
Yeah, exchangeability.
Yeah.
So the dollar is it's being depreciated and otherwise being spent or printed out of existence, or at least Bitcoin, which I don't understand very well, but I know via design is designed to hold its value. Mm-hmm. And so I buy gold, silver, and gold and silver to me are God's money. Mm-hmm. So I've started a gold mine. I've started silver mines. I have millions in gold and silver stored in vaults outside the U.S. I don't trust my government for confiscation, as you know. Mm-hmm. But when I looked at Bitcoin, was talking to guys like you and Max Kaiser and stuff like this, I'm going, I got it. It cannot be diluted, cannot be printed away. And so when I see what Biden is now, in 2008, they borrowed 700 billion, and now it's 7 trillion.
Yeah.
God almighty, you're still saving money.
Right.
You're crazy.
And more to come.
Yeah. It cannot stop.
No, it accelerates. Yeah. It accelerates until the currency breaks down completely. So that's interesting. You actually look at gold, silver, Bitcoin as an insurance policy, effectively.
Correct. A hedge.
So you're monitoring your net cash flows are determining whether something's an asset or liability, but you have to actually hedge the cash itself because it's being depreciated by the Fed and Treasury.
Correct.
That's brilliant.
And I thought was really interesting was that, I went to military school. So the books we studied in economics were Marx, Lenin, Stalin, and Mao.
Wow.
So by the time
by
the time I got to Vietnam, I was flying. I flew the gunship for them. I saw a different world. I saw communism in action.
Yeah.
And I see communism in America today. Yeah. That's what scares
me. Yeah. Yeah. Scares me as well. And this one it's more than just in America. It seems globally concerted this time.
Yeah.
This propaganda that entities like the World Economic Forum are pushing, that in 10 years you'll own nothing and be happy. It's blatant anti-capitalist propaganda.
No, it's pro-Marxist. I mean, as Marx said, he says, what is the purpose of communism? To destroy property.
Yeah.
To take your property.
That's right.
They do that through taxation and money printing.
Yeah. Which is the basis of civilized human action. If we don't have property, then we're just back in the Stone Age, effectively.
Well, you're serfs.
Yeah.
The word paysan, peasant, comes from the French word pay, land, sant, person of the land. And as Orwell said in Animal Farm, all animals are equal. Some are more equal than others.
Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah. So it's interesting that communism stated.
It's not taught in school.
No, not taught in school. And its stated intention is to abolish property, but technically it's the people that can control the state apparatus are really just accumulating all the property for themselves and forcing everyone else to work for them effectively.
And that's exactly what George Orwell wrote about at Animal Farm.
Yes.
All animals are equal.
Yeah,
Some are just more equal than others.
that's right.
So when you look at what happened in the last few elections, it was Hillary Clinton against Trump. And she's a pure academic elite. And Trump's a capitalist. And they thought that Hillary was going to win because it went from Obama. I'm not Republican or Democrat, so I'm a citizen. So it went from Obama, okay, we have a black guy. The next agenda is get a woman in there. And then Trump popped up. Because I remember in 2015, I was interviewing him. He and I wrote 2 books together, like I said. He's a good guy. He says, I'm sorry, I can't write. We're supposed to write the 3rd book. And he says, I can't do that book with you because I'm going to run for president. I said, man, good luck. And the next thing you see, he's coming down Trump Tower with Melania. And for those of you who are men who appreciate beautiful women, Melania is stunning in real life. And she's a model. But Vogue magazine didn't put her on the cover. So what is going on, Robert? What is going on when probably the most beautiful first first lady we've ever had gets taken off the cover of Vogue? But when you read Marx, he said, I'm going to get nailed for this one. He says, we should promote feminism, even ugly ones. Sorry, Robert. Here I am I'm in military school. I'm 19 years old, reading Marx and Stalin and Lenin. He says we should promote women, even ugly ones. I went, you gotta be kidding me.
Heck, I didn't know he actually said that.
All of this is in writing.
Yeah.
Just look up Stalin.
That's so interesting. What's funny too is the central bank. I've told this. The one piece of Marxist writing that I read was the 1848 Manifesto of the Communist Party, and its measure number 5 is the central bank. It's like we have to centralize control over cash and credit to operate a communist economy. So like central banking is not. It's not only like you're not hypothesizing that it's a communist institution. It is in the communist playbook. It's measure number 5.
Yes.
And
central banking is essential to communism.
Yes. And that's all it is doing, actually, is when you're printing money, you're just confiscating property from anyone that's depending on that money to hold its value. So it seems to me then this whole game ultimately revolves around property and property rights. And this is where, I would say Bitcoiners tend to believe its importance lives because Bitcoin is the hardest property to confiscate in human history because it's just information, right? If you custody it properly, like you said, you have vaults full of gold outside of the US because you don't trust US authorities, right? The likelihood of them confiscating the vaults or the buildings or whatever it may be. Bitcoin gives us this totally unique way to custody an asset in any information bearing medium. So it can be, you can publish it in an article to decode it. You can put it in your brain, you put it in a song, et cetera, et cetera. So can we have a truly capitalist world without difficult to confiscate property like Bitcoin? I mean, in my mind, it doesn't even seem possible. It just seems like we'd keep repeating this statist trend towards communism and revolution over and over.
Well, you need poor people to have a revolution, as you know. And so when I saw COVID come out and they shut down the economy, to me, it was another sign from Marx. And the thing that I'm concerned about now, I don't know what's going to happen, but if we go to the Fed coin, what happens when government takes over crypto? And, from what I can tell, it'll mean the end of banking. So bankers will become unemployed because the moment the Fed goes to 100% communist control of the central government and the economy, then you don't need Wells Fargo, you don't need JP Morgan and all that. I mean, I'm just saying it's the worst case scenario, but I'm watching that going, well, at that point, the moment they can control us by our money, Let's say this is what I predict, Robert. If, I'm not saying it's going to happen, if they go to Fed coin or Euro coin or Japanese coin or whatever it is, that's going to make gold, silver, and Bitcoin more valuable.
Of course.
Because it's untraceable at that point.
Mm.
And the whole thing, as you know, is central planning, which is communism, is they want to control your life. They want to trace your movements. They want to know where you are, what you're doing, what you're spending your money on, who you're sleeping with, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So one of the things I've been saying to people is start acquiring things that are untraceable, that are tangible.
Mm.
For example, bullets today are more valuable than they were 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But the moment they can track the bullet, you know what I mean? They say, well, whose bullet, who owned that bullet that killed that guy? Says, oh, Robert Kiyosaki owned that bullet.
Mm.
That bullet becomes less valuable.
Right.
As Chris Rock said, he says, if you want to stop murders, just make bullets 50,000 a round.
Yeah.
He says, I'm gonna shoot you, but I'll have to save up to buy the bullet. So Chris Rock is a prophet as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. So it's the
more untraceable, Robert, the more invisible it is and not trackable. Mm-hmm. It's gonna, in the next 20 years, it's gonna become more and more valuable. So even today, they can track gold coins if they have a chip in them.
Right.
So my coins have no chips in them.
Your Bitcoins don't?
No chips. How are they going to track?
Yeah. Yeah, I think
so. That's kind of why I bought it. I don't know much about the cyber world, but I just do know what the Fed is kind of up to, and they want centralized control, which is communism.
Yes. And to your point, that the more, and this is kind of the bet on Bitcoin and gold in a lot of ways, is the more the state tries to exert control over money or these other tools, the more demand it creates for things that are resistant to that control in terms of traceability or can't be inflated or whatever. This quote,
how invisible can it become?
Yeah.
So a bullet today is invisible. They'd have to get the gun and track the barrel. I was a Marine.
Yeah.
But the moment they put a chip in the bullet, you're finished.
Right. This quote was tweeted out by my friend Mark Moss today, and this is from Henry Kissinger. He said, "Who controls the food supply controls the people. Who controls the energy can control whole continents. Who controls money can control the world."
Correct.
So it seems like the state is really going after these three primary power sources, right? It was just food, energy, and money. And through those levers, they can control everything, control everyone. But in my mind, the only tools we have to fight back with this is digital technology, right? To your point about guns and bullet tracing, if you can 3D print firearms or 3D print ammunition, then all of a sudden you can produce these things without being traced through the supply chain. If you're using something like Bitcoin via, the Lightning Network or some other privacy mechanisms, you can actually make your money untraceable. What other hope do we have for fighting back? Do you have, in this mentality of resistance towards state control or this drift towards communism, and what other ways do you resist or advise people resisting?
Well, let's use a physical metaphor on that whole thing. When you look at E's and S's, it's like a vitamin drip or like an IV drip. Mm-hmm. They got this plastic tube and that's going into your arm. It's called Cashflow. It's your paycheck. Mm-hmm. As long as you need that IV line, that plastic line, and they got a scissors next to it, they got you. Mm. All they have to do is control you. This scissors here, I'm going to cut it. So that's why years and years ago, when I came back from Vietnam, my poor dad lost his job. He's a PhD because he challenged the government. The government says, "You're fired." See, look what happened during the COVID-19 lockdown. Doctors got fired for questioning.
Mm.
Amazon they did this whole article on Amazon today. If you're one of these independent contractor drivers, and they can track how fast you deliver a package, they do not care that the gate was locked or the apartment complex was complex. They just fire you. An algorithm fires you. So that's what I mean by the IV line or the blood transfusion line. So as I got older and more aware of what was going on with the government, I didn't want that transfusion line. So that's why in Rich Dad Poor Dad, lesson number 1 is the rich don't work for money. We work for assets, and those assets I own and control.
Yeah.
I get my cash flow from my assets. I have no stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs. My assets produce money. And that's one of the biggest assets I have. Like I said, with ES, the quadrant, ES, B, and the I. The right-hand side is B and I. That's brand. How much is a brand worth? So when you look at I's like Buffett, a guy like Buffett only invests in brands. He only invests in things like Gillette, Coca-Cola, Apple, Newmont Mining, and all this stuff. So the object of the entrepreneur was then to learn the skill set to create assets that are brands. That took a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying to do it because most people can't do it. But if you can, then you have a Bezos, which is Amazon. You have Jobs, which is Apple. Henry Ford was Ford. And Rockefeller was Standard Oil. So it was all I do is I kind of open people's eyes and then they can look at where to go. The reason I'm always saying gold, silver, Bitcoin is as of right now, they're untraceable. What's going to happen in the future? I don't know, because just recently, my friend who's into gold said a shipment of gold came from China, coins with chips in.
Wow.
So when you think, you think like that, you see the world differently.
Yeah. Yeah. So
it's like Chris Rock says, I'm going to kill you, but I have to save up money to buy the bullet first.
So there's this.
I think that's so funny.
Yes, he's hilarious. So there's this struggle then. Really, it's an informational struggle at the end of the day, right? It's like who's controlling the information, who's tracking and tracing these resources.
It's between your left ear and your right ear.
Yeah.
And this, what do you put in there? You still have the freedom to choose what you put between your left ear and your right ear.
Right.
You see, the biggest problem is education.
Yeah.
The NEA, National Extortion Association for Teachers Unions, they control what's put in a kid's brain.
Yeah.
It's not good.
And parents are dependent on the education system because they have to go to work 40 hours a week to pay the government,
And
wow.
And the mantra is, if you don't go to school, you won't get a
job. Wow.
And so by the time I was, 15 years old, every time the teacher said that to me, I said, well, I don't want a job, so I'm in the right place.
This quote in your book says, true capitalists use their financial knowledge to simply find an escape. So you're trying to take assets out of this system effectively.
No,
what is it?
It's called freedom.
Freedom.
You see, on the E and the S side, you're attached to that IV line. On the B and the I side, you're tapped into universe, and the universe is infinite. Like Bitcoin didn't exist 20 years ago.
Yeah,
and now it's going to take over the world. And then you got guys like Peter Schiff, who said he's a piece of shit, and all these guys. I don't know why they argue personally. Just buy something, shut up, move on.
It seems like it's become a marketing tactic for him, just trolling Bitcoin.
Absolutely. And every time the price comes down, he yells and screams. I mean, he's a good friend. All these guys are good friends of mine. You know what I mean? I think we're all a bunch of. That's like when I was in Miami with you at Gammon's thing.
Yeah.
I learned more hanging out at those places because I get to listen to all these different points of view. Because points of view are infinite,
Right.
Everybody's got one.
Yeah.
Do you know? I just listened to them and said, okay, I like that. I don't like that. You know?
Yeah.
I liked your when you were up there and George was up there and Brent Johnson.
Yeah.
That was a powerhouse of knowledge.
Brent and Jeff Snyder was up there as well.
Yeah, Jeff, oh my God.
Yeah.
Talking to him was like destroyed my brain.
Yeah, that was a great panel.
Oh, Jesus. I mean, what else would you do with your time? I would love to have, I just sat in that audience in Miami. People say, you should go and speak. I said, no, I went to listen.
Well, you gave a great presentation too. I saw yours that morning.
I'm just a Marine. I curse, yell, and swear. I speak to the right audience. I'm not speaking to the National Teachers Association. They'd hang me up. If I was speaking to a bunch of teachers, there'd be a second crucifixion. It'd be a Japanese guy, not a Jewish guy.
So let me ask you, so on that topic that we discussed on the panel that morning was the future of money.
Yeah.
Where do you have a vision on where this is going? I mean, clearly central banks are trying to introduce Fed coin, which would, to your point, eliminate the need for intermediary banks. We'd all just have an account with the Fed or whatever our local central bank is. Bitcoin is a big wild card in this whole thing. Clearly, you're a proponent of gold. Do you have a vision in mind for where the future of money is headed or where it potentially could head?
I still say it's infinite because the infinity lies between your left ear and your right ear. And so that's why I go to like George Gammon's event, and I listen to guys like, you're the young guys coming up. I'm sitting there just soaking it all in. And then it kind of mixes with my old guy attitude. And then I go, okay, I think I'll go this path or that path. I think the most stupid thing to do is go to school, get a job, work hard, save money, invest in a 401k, pay your taxes. I mean, it takes no imagination.
Yeah.
And as Einstein said, imagination is more important than knowledge.
Right.
Because imagination is infinite. Knowledge is finite.
Which comes back to the point of education that, as I guess as educators, we should be stoking the imagination of human beings, that we don't have to live under this financial tyranny. There are alternatives. Correct.
Oh. I'm so glad your generation is coming up, because I don't know if you know this, but Rich Dad Poor Dad was turned down by the New York Times and all the New York editors saying I didn't know what I was talking about. It was so radical for them. I said, all it is a book on accounting, income statement, balance sheet, statement of cash flow. That's all it is. But academics don't know what accounting is.
Right.
I mean, you know that more than anybody. I mean, you're in it.
The intellectual yet idiots, I think, is one of their taglines, the IYIs. So caught up in theory or the need to express their theory or find something that's coherent with their theory that they ignore practice. They ignore what's happening in the real world. Bitcoin's a great example of that. Even really like people I otherwise consider to be really smart, like Taleb, who I'm a big fan of his writing, he came out and wrote this paper against Bitcoin. But the very guy that actually came up with the term intellectual yet idiots, that it's practice over theory, is now theorizing about why Bitcoin should be worth $0, when in practice it's worth, $500 billion or whatever it is. So it comes back to that original point of decree, versus I can't afford it versus how can I afford it? Like, instead of telling and acting and pretending as if you have totalizing knowledge and you have the answer, we should instead always be asking, right? Exploring that infinite, varied points of view and see what answers, even if they're tentative answers, we can arrive at.
Yeah. So let me say it again, as Einstein has said, imagination is infinite. Knowledge is limited.
Yeah.
And so when you have somebody who's operating on knowledge, like most academic types are, they're screwed.
Yeah.
So just think about it this way. Okay, this is what my rich dad taught me, because I teach entrepreneurship. I don't teach job security or 401k. I mean, if that's what you want, have a good life. It's not where I want to operate, because I think the future lies in your imagination. So when I talk to people, what does an entrepreneur do? An entrepreneur builds a product that's smarter and better than they are. Let me say it again. Entrepreneurs build products that are smarter, better, harder working than they are. So, for example, Steve Jobs, who dropped out of Reed College. I lived next door to Reed College in Oregon for a while, but he invented the cell phone. That cell phone is 1,000 times more powerful than he is. It works harder. It serves more people. Do you know what I mean? That's an entrepreneur. And Henry Ford was the automobile, the Ford at least. And then you had guys like Thomas Edison, who failed 1,014 times making the electric light bulb. Well, the electric light didn't exist until Thomas Edison said, maybe we should try it. And a school teacher would tell him, well, you failed 1,014 times. Another thing, too, that happened was the electric light gave birth to a guy named John D. Rockefeller of Standard Oil. Because up until that time, John D. Rockefeller made his fortune selling kerosene. And you know what he was doing, Robert? He was stockpiling the residual of kerosene, which is oil. So he had these huge tanks of oil. And so when kerosene went out of business because of Thomas Edison, Rockefeller became richer because the automobile was invented. He had the oil.
Amazing.
And I only know this because I went to school to work for Standard Oil. I can drive water tankers. That's why my background is naval architecture, oil tankers, big business.
Wow.
And then I flew from the Marine Corps.
Yeah. That's so, you make this point too in the book that, again, this divide between the bureaucratic and capitalistic mentality is the government ideal is to avoid having excess money. If you fail to spend your allotted funds, you risk losing it in the next budget. You would certainly not be recognized for being efficient. Business people, on the other hand, are rewarded for having excess money and applauded for their efficiency.
Very good point.
Yeah, one group is solving problems, the capitalists. The other group is just creating problems.
Well, that's even more important than that, Robert, is that, the big question today, is it inflation or deflation? A true capitalist causes deflation. They want to provide a better product at a better price. It does more work for more people. Yes. Whereas a bureaucrat needs inflation.
Yes.
And what inflation is a tax on the working class.
That's right.
It's so horrible what the NEA, the National Extortion Association, is doing in schools. They're punishing the working class. Yeah.
I had Jeff Booth on to discuss that very topic, and it just makes sense. Like, we're trading with one another, competing to solve problems. The better we get at solving those problems, the cheaper goods and services should become. It's intuitively obvious.
Correct.
And how could that ever? It's amazing that they tricked us to believe that that's a bad thing. Lower prices every year are a bad thing. How is that even?
Well, look at my board game. Look at my board game. Let's say it's $100. It can teach thousands of people. It doesn't get tired. Doesn't ask for a pay raise. Doesn't want benefits. And doesn't want a vacation.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I love the point you made about the games, that they are a reflection of your behavior. So you told the story about the woman that played the game, got frustrated that she didn't learn the lesson, but then a few weeks later came back and said, oh, I realize now that this cash flow game was kind of reflecting my own behavior back at me. that in her
Correct.
actual life, she had not managed her cash flow well and had a painful divorce and
Correct.
all of this.
Correct.
And I really liked this. This was some Japanese wisdom you shared in the book, that the Japanese were aware of 3 powers: the power of the sword, the power of the jewel, and the power of the mirror.
Yeah.
Maybe you could tell me about that.
Well, as an accountant, what's a financial statement?
I guess it's a mirror, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It measures how smart you are with your money. And most people have no idea what a financial statement is. But that's all rich dad, poor dad is. I think it's kind of, I mean, with your background in accounting, all I did was take what you knew, I dumbed it down. So
honestly, you completely did.
And then the cash flow game, as you know, it's like going to the gym, because as Maria Montessori said in the Montessori school system, what the hand does, the mind remembers.
Mm.
So when you sit there with a cash flow game, you have to do your sums. You have to do with a pencil, you erase, you're moving things, you're watching, well, if I do this, this happens, and all this stuff. So the cash flow game is like going to the gym for your brain.
Mm.
And how you keep these things moving from this direction to that direction, this direction, that direction.
Mm.
But in school, you just talk to memorize. Go to school, sign up your credit cards, get a job, and then put your money in a 401k. You can train a chimpanzee to do that.
Right.
But the cash flow game is an exercise in accounting for your brain. And we have the electronic version, but I think the board game version is going to the gym. Mm-hmm. You sit there, you cooperate. If you've seen the game, everybody has to audit the other guy. Mm. So when Robert Breedlove makes his move, I've got to audit you. Mm. Do you know what I mean? That's called checking the balance.
Sounds like Bitcoin.
Good. Yeah, it's very good practice.
Yeah.
And I meet these idiots. Well, I played the game once. I didn't learn a damn thing. Thank you.
It was the people that complained about the rigor, right? The doing the math, having to audit one another.
Correct.
The people that didn't like doing the math are the ones that needed it most.
Well, it's not hard. It's not calculus. It's just addition and subtraction.
Yeah. But it's work. This whole thing,
I think it's kind of funny personally. You don't like the math. Well, it is kind of higher math. It's called addition and subtraction.
Right.
A little multiplication now and then.
That's maybe another fundamental divide between the capitalist and bureaucratic mentality is the capitalist creates value through work. And the bureaucrat is extracting value through theft. They're not contributing anything through work.
Correct. And you've got to have, there'll always be both of them.
Yeah.
One's not right or one's not wrong. There'll always be two of them. You know, there's all coins have 3 sides: heads, tails, and edge of the coin. Mm. So the intelligence is found the edge. So like when I listen to a Max Kaiser, who's all Bitcoin, and then I listen to Peter Schiff, who's anti-Bitcoin, well, I listen to both sides. What's the big deal? What is the big deal?
Right.
I don't care. But our schools teach us we must be right. Mm-hmm. And I'd just rather be rich. So I just do it. I just do what works for me. If having a 401k is your idea of investing, have a good life.
Yeah.
I don't want one because I have to pay taxes.
Right.
I don't like paying taxes.
Yeah.
What they tell you is a tax incentivized place. No, it's not. Give me a break.
Yeah. I liked this too, that what you described is when you said, quote, "When I say mind your own business, I mean build and keep your asset column strong. Yes. The best thing about money is that it works 24 hours a day and can work for generations."
Correct.
So clearly, with a show called The What is Money Show, I'm often thinking about what money is. But this was a new one for me, that money it's like an inexhaustible employee in a way.
Correct.
And if you think about it that way, that you're putting the money to work for you intelligently, you get a drastically different result than if you're working for the money.
Well, I'm not a technology guy. I barely use a cell phone. But what I understand about Bitcoin is it only gets more valuable. It only holds its value longer, especially in contrast to the Fed and the Treasury. We're going to print it and tax it.
Yeah.
So as long as you don't spend your Bitcoin as of today, you don't have a taxable event.
That's right.
It just keeps, it's a whole store of value.
Yeah. The simple way I try to describe it for people is clearly there's a fixed supply of 21 million. So like you said earlier about gold effectively being an insurance policy on the Treasury and the Fed, that's how I describe Bitcoin. I say it's an insurance policy that becomes more valuable the more dollars they print. Simple as that. But there's no counterparty. You don't need the insurance company to pay you out. Like holding a Bitcoin is owning the insurance company itself.
Well, gold, silver, and Bitcoin, I mean, the coins and all that have no counterparty risk.
That's right. Which is
counterparty means it's not an IOU from anybody else.
Yeah.
And so when I understood it, it was Raoul Pal of
Real Vision.
Yeah. So he explained it to me that I talked to guys like you and then Jeff Booth. Then Jeff Snyder blew my fucking brain out. But anyway, I just sit there. I'm a dumbass Marine. I just go and make money. And then I see, to me, gold, silver, and Bitcoin is the end of the chain, not the start of the chain.
Yeah.
The object is to get to gold, silver, and Bitcoin.
Yes. Because it's
and
money.
In the process, like the Green New Deal, I just invested with Marin Katusa in carbon credits. I have no idea what a carbon credit is. But I only put up a few bucks. I've already made a couple of million. And so I'm getting smarter because now I'm interested. Well, how did I make money? I didn't sit there and question Marin. I mean, he's a calculus teacher. I didn't do well in math at all. So when Marin says, this is what I'm going to do, I said, okay, I'll do it. So I listen to guys like you, Jeff Booth, Max Kaiser, and I go, okay. Then I listen to Peter Schiff, who's a good friend of mine. And I remind him that he lives in Puerto Rico. And I give all the guys that live in Puerto Rico, like Mark Moss and Jeff, George Gammon. If you're a real estate guy, you don't have to live in Puerto Rico because you don't pay taxes anyway.
Yeah.
So the only guys living in Puerto Rico are dodging taxes.
Yeah.
But if you're a real estate guy, you don't have to live in Puerto Rico. I think it's kind of funny, personally.
Yeah.
But the end game is gold, silver, Bitcoin. It's the end of the rainbow.
So yeah, those are the points you're putting on the scoreboard ultimately.
Right.
Bearer
That's
asset. Bearer asset.
Yeah. Nobody else owns it. I own it.
Yeah.
There's no counterparty risk to it.
Yeah. So do you then you manage your portfolio to be a percentage of gold, silver, Bitcoin? Is that what you're like?
No, I don't. No, I don't even know how much I have. It's in the millions.
Yeah.
I just know I went over $1 billion in debt. And every time Susie Orman gets out her credit card and snips it with her scissors, I think she's circumcising me.
Now, how do you maybe you could speak to the intelligent management of debt, because clearly there's smart debt and not smart debt. How do you prevent assets from being liquidated and protect yourself? What advice do you have there? I'm an insider. So I know exactly who the team that goes the acquisition. We just bought 600 units in Houston, apartment house. So we had to raise like $160 million for that. And then interest rates are so low, I can't believe it. It's like lowering the interest rate is like going to Neiman Marcus and they're saying we're putting everything on sale. Yeah. So when the Fed drops interest rates, they're putting money on sale. Yeah. Right? Credit, debt. Yeah. And with that, I buy an asset that's going to cover the debt. So the asset pays off the debt. I don't pay it off. And then I got a tax break via depreciation, amortization, and appreciation. You said 1031 out. So any appreciation I make,
I don't sell it, I borrow it out. So if I have $10 million in equity inside a property, I go back to the bank and I borrow out the 10 million.
Yeah.
Because the asset will pay for the 10 million. So my apartment houses pay for it all.
Gotcha.
So I'm not a real estate guy. I'm actually a capitalist.
Yeah.
I'm just looking for the best deal, who's got the best price of money, and what was the government offering me.
Do you have any major risk events you've been through, or major failures that have helped hone you and sharpen you, help you grow? Maybe there's one you could share.
Well, failure is part of success, as you know.
Yeah.
One of the reasons you go to school, you want to cut down that failure rate as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
The mistake that school makes is because you don't make mistakes, but you can't be an entrepreneur if you don't make mistakes. You see, as an accountant, if you make mistakes, you get fired.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, that's what the big eight, I don't know what how many left today.
Big four now.
The big four now, they fire you.
Yeah.
But as an entrepreneur, I've got to go out there and make as many mistakes as possible and learn quickly. My biggest mistakes have been in people. I hired, it's like you don't notice Jim Rogers talking about George Soros. So partnerships are some of the most painful things. It's like a divorce.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Hiring and meeting people of the same mindset are horrible processes, but that's how you learn. So, the best way you meet people, some of the best deals, some of the worst deals have always brought out the best partners. Also picked out the best partners. So today I'm down to a team of about 10, and we've come through hell together. And so it's like getting married. My wife and I separated when she no longer needed the money. She says, well, I guess I don't need you anymore. So, well, I guess not. That's why Gates and all those guys in Bezos, their wives leave. They don't need you. So they just move on. And women are pretty materialistic also.
Now you're still married, right?
We're married, but we're no longer, we're separated.
Ah, okay. I didn't know that. And this is who I met in Miami?
Yeah. And we're still best of friends.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
She's gorgeous. She's fun. We have a good time together. But there was, Rollo Tomasi was at George's event in Miami. Have you listened to Rollo?
I don't believe I have, no.
As a man, you should listen to him.
Okay.
He pisses women off. So I was at George Gammon in Miami, and Rollo was talking to my doctor, medical doctor, and she's drop dead gorgeous. She was ready to tear his throat out. She's the one most, she's got me healthy. She's wonderful. I love her dearly.
Yeah.
But he has a way of aggravating women like you've never seen. Wow. Because he understands what he calls hypergamy.
Okay.
That women have this window called shelf life.
Yeah.
17 to 27. Where guys like you and me, we can go forever. Does that make sense?
I saw this letter. I don't know. I think a girl had written a letter to a hedge fund manager asking why she couldn't find a guy that was making more than whatever, $500,000 a year in income, something to that effect. And he replied to the letter saying, because she's a depreciating asset, I guess describing like the shelf life you're saying, whereas he is an appreciating asset. He's making more and more money every year. So he's actually increasing his market value as his earning power increases. Whereas men tend to date women not for their earning power. They date them for their physical attractiveness and whatnot. So it's kind of a harsh reality, but it is largely true.
Well, it's really surprising, Robert. I'm an old man. I was at the bar the other night with these beautiful women, and I was spouting off Rollo Tomasi. Because I was explaining, I said, the trouble with women is this: if you're beautiful, you're smart, and you're rich, the fewer men are available to you, because a woman will never go out with a man who's less than her.
Right.
But men will go out with a dog. They don't care.
Right.
As long as the body is hot, the face is hot, they'll go out with her. So that's what Rollo. I mean, every man and woman should listen to Rollo Tomassi. It's called something male. But I was at George Gavin's party, and Rollo and I fell madly in love. So he's holding court, and I have a young lady who works with me. She's 24 years old. She is 24 from women is the hottest zone possible. You know what I mean? She's at peak market value. And then her mother was there, and Rollo is nonstop. He is hysterical for guys like us. But Alexandra, who's 24, her eyeballs are as big as saucers. Her mother was going to put muffs on her ear, and my doctor, who's 34, who's hot as a pistol also, she was vibrating. I mean, he upset her to no end.
Wow.
Because, Robert, it's primal.
Yeah.
What Rollo talks about is primal. I mean, long before caveman time.
Yeah.
So I have an aunt who escaped from China, when Mao took over. And she told me, she says, yes, I'm a descendant of Genghis Khan. It's a big deal. He had 40,000 kids. So what hypergamy is, Robert, is the black, and it's simple, the alpha male did the breeding.
Yeah, right.
The less guys got castrated. So when I was a kid, I used to go to this farm, this dairy farm, and only the male bull, the breeding bull bred.
Right.
Any male offspring were castrated.
Right.
And kind of that's hypergamy. So the women are always looking for the breeding bull, and the breeding bull is looking for more women. That's what Rollo. I'm saying it different than Rollo would say it.
Yeah.
But Robert, you would have been proud of me. Here I'm an old guy, and I have all these hot women around me. Their husbands are going, "Who is that Japanese guy there?" And I was explaining that women have this shelf life, and the more powerful they get, and the more successful they get, the fewer men are available.
Yeah.
Whereas a guy, we're whores.
Yeah. Yeah, it's there's that primal aspect to it, but then there's also this, humans have this proclivity to mate, in monogamous relationships long term. So it's very confusing. And now we have all of this feminist backlash and
male toxic.
To even listen to this conversation, people would probably be upset about it. Some people, but there's a primal element to it that you can't really argue with.
Well, I listen to like you, Jeff Snyder, and those guys. I listen to these other guys too. I go, okay, I don't have to be right about anything.
Yeah, that's right.
I just want to hear what you're saying.
It's a great mentality, honestly. And because then you don't need to, I love what you said earlier, like instead of trying to be right, just try to be rich. And you become rich by assimilating multiple viewpoints and considering them, right? By inquiring, asking, trying to see the world through the eyes of others versus trying to establish a point and be right about it, which doesn't really get you anything.
Correct.
Which is silly.
But like the question I asked myself, how can I make $1 million and pay no taxes? Well, I can't figure that out, but my accountant can.
Yeah.
And my tax attorney can. I don't have to figure it out.
Yeah.
But
my mom, I'm from Tennessee. I think I mentioned to you, grew up in Tennessee. So she has a lot of redneck wisdom, you might say. And one of the things she used to always say was, it's not what you know, but if you know how to look it up. So you don't need to even have the resource or the answer in hand. You need to be able to gain access to it. Do you have, I didn't know that you and Kim were separated, but still working together. Do you have any advice on that front for guys? Like, that sounds like a really complicated situation to manage. I mean, how did you pull that off?
Well, Mr. Breedlove, you're asking one of the most dangerous questions you can ask.
we can pass on it if you like.
No, but you think about it. What's it? Jeff, what's his name? Microsoft, Bill Gates.
Bill Gates.
That's going to be expensive. Bezos, expensive.
Yeah.
And so when I was a kid, there was a TV show called Father Knows Best. And the dad went out, he came home, and June, his wife, sat there, she had an apron. I was, hi dear, how was work? And all this stuff. Then there was Leave It to Beaver, and the father was out. And then around the 90s came Al Bundy.
Yeah, I remember. I grew up with Al Bundy.
Al Bundy, and then came Roseanne Barr.
Okay.
So when you watch the evolution of demography,
yeah,
you can see the change. And so women are getting more and more powerful.
Yes.
But the underlying breeding bull and cow mentality sits there. And it pisses people off. They get so hot.
Yeah.
And so I was sitting, I hate to tell you, I was sitting at the bar, I have these three beautiful women around me, and their husbands are going, and I'm not fooling around. I never cheated on my wife, never once, which was a mistake. I should have, but I didn't. I mean, according to Rollo, I should have. But anyway, I'm sitting like this. And I said to the husbands, I said, you can take this picture of this guy, could be Japanese, black, white, pink, nobody cares. You got three hot women. Every guy in the world wants to be there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's no explanation.
Yeah.
It's just, this is what guys want.
Yeah.
And women always want the better male. So that's every time I talk to you, I mean, you're so damn good looking. I was like, you gotta be a male model someplace, I mean, I'd be a Chippendale dancer or something. But
I'm going to stick to Bitcoin.
we're talking about something that's primal.
Yeah.
What happened in the caveman days, once a woman was no longer capable of giving birth or hunter-gathering, they kicked her out.
Yeah.
And so when I explained that to women, I get hate mail, I get all this stuff. I said, look, I didn't make the rules.
Yeah.
I just talk about me going to the dairy, looking at the breeding bull and all the cows, and what happens to the bulls? They become steers.
Yeah. What do you think that the female conception of a better man, has that changed over time? Because I know like Jordan Peterson talks about women tend to prefer men that are competent but also generous, because that is a good indicator of how good of a provider they'll be. Frankly, they can make more money, create more money, but they're also generous with it. Do you think that conception has changed over time, or is it still something very primal that women just want one type of guy?
Well, Robert, like I said, there's many points of view. And Rollo Tomasi thinks that Jordan Peterson is a simp.
Thinks he's simple?
He's a wimp.
Oh, really?
Okay, everybody's got a point of view.
Yeah.
So I sit there, I tune them all in. I listen to you, I'll listen to Schiff.
Yeah.
What have I lost? I've gained.
Yeah.
So Jordan Peterson is talking about the kind of male that Rollo Tomasi says don't become.
Ah, okay.
And so between the two is my choice.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. No, you're simulating multiple viewpoints.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the same as, should everybody become an entrepreneur? I don't know.
Right. Yeah. It's, I don't know. This is just like the age-old struggle, right? Men trying to figure out women, women trying to figure out men. No one's ever figured it out. We just have to get along because the species depends on it. But
but women are becoming more powerful.
Yeah.
You need less men.
Right.
Hypergamy, or according to Rollo Tomasi, the trouble with that is women have fewer men. Mm-hmm. That's the risk. Mm-hmm. Whereas a guy gets older and more successful, more women.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's a fascinating subject.
So this point, the power, people are becoming more powerful in the world in general because capitalism is increasing the capital stock of the world. So people are becoming more wealthy, right? So women then are becoming less dependent on men. They can
Correct.
create their own individual income and wealth.
Correct.
So this gets to one point in your book that it's about money being very much a mentality, right? It's determining that, here's the quote I'll read, and it's related to fear and emotions, but instead of admitting the truth about how they feel, they react to their feelings and fail to think. They
Right.
feel the fear, so they go to work, hoping that money will soothe the fear, but it does not. Money is running their lives, and they refuse to tell the truth about that. Money is in control of their emotions and souls. So you're describing how people get, this is the hamster wheel, right? People get
Right.
caught up on the hamster wheel. They think that the answer to the, I guess the economic insecurity they have is to go out and hustle and make more money, but there's more of a mentality of how that money is being used for you, right? Like to the point about Rich Dad, he pays himself first, then he pays his creditors, then he pays his taxes. Whereas the employee, Poor Dad, would be paying his taxes, then himself, then his bills.
Or
maybe his bills than himself, actually.
Correct.
So there's more power being created in the world through the economic gains of capitalism, but then it's almost like based on people's attitudes or approach to that, they separate themselves into different groups, either capitalists or bureaucratic. Is that how you see this playing out, kind of?
It's actually more frightening than that, because as you and I know, is the Fed is communist. It's Marxist. Central banks are Marxist.
Yeah.
And what Lenin said is that if you want to destroy capitalism, debauch the currency. And Marx says, if you want to destroy capitalism, put in taxes. And so you look at what Biden, I'm not Republican or Democrat, but what Biden is doing is printing more money and raising taxes. So I see that as a communist move. The point here is this, is the gap is getting too big. So we're on the verge of revolution.
Yeah.
So a lot of times when I do talks, I hold up $100 bill and I hold up Zimbabwe $10 million notes, with which I have a $10 million note or a $100 bill or a gold coin.
Yeah.
And then they have to sit there. I took the gold coin, more than the $100 bill of Zimbabwe dollar. But this is my main point, Robert, is that your mind is infinite. I don't need money. Bitcoin is the end of the chain.
Yeah.
The start of the chain is my ideas. So I write a book. I sell the license to 50 publishers throughout the world. I'm in the money immediately. The cash pours in. I buy real estate. I pay no taxes and I make more money. It's not a hard program. So Bitcoin is like the last of the chain for me.
Yeah.
Or many young people is the start of the chain for them.
Yeah. So I think this is the one area that people often ignore, but it seems critical to getting to the other side of this entrepreneurial productive mentality and getting out of the rat race. And I'll just read a couple more quotes from your book here. It said, the avoidance of money is just as psychotic as being attached to money. Many people say that, quote, I'm not interested in money, but then they'll go and work a job for 8 hours per day. That is a denial of truth. If they weren't interested in money, then why are they working? The main cause of poverty or financial struggle is fear and ignorance. So it's really people, living under a self-cast delusion in a way to try and tell yourself that money doesn't matter or it's not important. And this is something I think you made the point that Poor Dad often said, that he wasn't concerned about money.
Correct.
But when in fact your stated beliefs or your cognitive beliefs even, they're divergent from your actions. You're still going to work 40 hours plus a week for money. So is there advice you have for people to deal with that schism? It seems like that is something, that mentality is one that is imposed through the lack of education about money, to your original point. So would you just encourage people to go out and educate themselves, or?
Well, that's why I created, in 1996, my wife and I created the Cashflow board game. As Maria Montessori said in Montessori school system, what the hand does, the mind remembers. In other words, you have to do something.
Yeah.
And you just keep thinking, you're not doing much but thinking.
Yeah.
But that's like, Tiger Woods saying, well, you don't have to practice, just read my book.
Right.
And someday you'll be PGA champion. It's not going to happen that way.
Yeah.
So academics are completely opposite than entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So that's why, like I said, New York Times, every editor turned down my book, Rich Dad Poor Dad. I've been under attack from them forever, because they're academics. They think if they memorize the answer, they got it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a false idea. Like even you were talking about how hard it is to be an accountant. It's work.
Oh yeah.
So what I did was I took accountancy, which is the most important subject for an entrepreneur, and I put it into a simple form: income statement, balance sheet, statement of cash flow.
Yeah.
And then the game actually makes you do the numbers correct, talk to people, look at deals. And it's like going to the gym for your brain, but you have to do something. If you don't do something, your thoughts remain the same. That's the problem. That's why our school system is corrupt. The NEA, Forbes calls them the National Extortion Association. They're horrible people. They're communists, because Marx says workers of the world unite. That's unions. I never belonged to a union. I refused to. But if you want to belong to a union, that's your choice. I'm not against what you do. I'm just telling you what I did. So the thing is, you have to do something to learn something. You cannot learn to play golf reading a book or sitting in a classroom.
All right.
You got to get out there and do the work. You got to practice. You probably, anybody who's successful does practices all the time.
Yeah.
That's the difference. They don't think about it.
So you've got to face your fears and take action.
Correct.
And
well, I'm really fortunate. I go to Lifetime Fitness, and they built a gym right behind my house. The hardest part is a 100-yard walk.
Getting started, right?
No, just getting to the damn place. And once I'm there, I'm so lazy, I hire a coach. Because if I didn't hire a coach, I'd sit there and eat bonbons or something in the cafe.
Now, you do that every morning? You work out every morning? Or
about 4 times a week.
4 times a week.
Yeah. But the thing is, the hardest walk is that 100 yards.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then once I'm there, I'm still lazy. Yeah. I just hired this coach his name is Vernon. He's the best guy around. And then, when I was a kid, we used those heavy weights.
Yeah.
He just used rubber bands.
Right.
I'm blown away at how my body has changed, because he can actually torque a certain muscle and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But I have to get there. Right. And I hire coaches because I'm lazy.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I know I'm lazy.
Yeah.
I want somebody to push me.
Yeah.
So our only problem is ourselves. And so the people listening to this right now, as well, it's easy for you. You already have money and all that. Well, I've also been down $30 million, and I get all back. That was hard, because my accountant and attorney ran off with the money. Wow. And the reason why I love my wife so much is she stuck with me through that process. But that process of working out where we screwed up made us richer and smarter. Right. Does that make sense to you? We had to find out we did not know. And so today, we're $1 billion in debt, but that debt is buying assets for us. And the more debt we have, the more tax we pay. But it takes practice.
Now, is that the story? You said the 30 million you were down. Was that the story you once mentioned, that you lost a substantial sum and you paid back some investors? Was that that episode?
30 million was the most. I've lost smaller deals, bad things. Every single one was because I trusted somebody. It was the biggest mistake.
Yeah.
I mean, even in gold, I started a gold mine in China. I took it public through Toronto Stock Exchange for an IPO. And we found $1 billion mine vein in Dalian, China. And as soon as we produced gold, the Chinese government nationalized it.
Wow.
So I was a billionaire for about a month, long ago, and the Chinese took it.
And that was it. No compensation at all. Just
Correct.
wow.
That's who we're dealing with, man.
Yeah.
That's who we're dealing with.
That's a stark reminder of the battle that's being fought in the world between capitalist and statist.
And then the Chinese invest in America. They come through Silicon Valley.
Mm-hmm.
And Wall Street and all that.
Yeah.
And then they finance the NEA and Biden. I'm not Republican or Democrat. I'm just saying follow the money. Just follow it.
Follow the money. Totally makes sense.
As long as you need the money, you're like the puppet on the string, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, he who controls the money has the puppet dance.
Yeah. Well, Robert, this has been fantastic. I, really appreciate you sharing your wisdom. I appreciate your book. I think it's excellent. I suggest everyone go out and check it out. It's called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You've probably heard of it. I've heard about it my whole life. Finally got around to reading it.
Thank you. Honored.
Yeah. And it's been a pleasure getting to know you. I've been on your show a couple of times. We met in Miami. And I just appreciate the wisdom you've shared and the bluntness. You don't hold back. You really tell it how it is. And I'm an admirer of that. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, as you know, one of my heroes was Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men about the Marine. And Marines are taught to say, you want the truth? You can't handle the truth. And I think the issue is how much truth can we handle?
Yeah.
And that's why I listen to as many points of view as possible.
Right.
Make my own decisions.
That's
so it's honored to get to know you. It's nice to see young guys coming up who are teaching. So thank you for that.
Thank you. It's been great having you on. Would you like to tell the audience where to go, your website, or to get your book? Anything in particular?
Rich Dad Poor, just go to richdad.com. But the most important thing we have is we have cash flow clubs. Mm-hmm. And a cash flow club, and we pump in like YouTube videos. So they hear from my instructors, like my accountant, my attorneys and all this, my real estate guys. And then they play the cash flow game and they cooperate, help each other. In school, that's called cheating. And we want people to make mistakes with fake money, play money. Mm-hmm. And that's how you get smarter. So our whole job is to make you smarter.
Love it. Yeah. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Robert, thank you so much.
Thanks. Keep up the good work, Robert.
Will do.